Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Uplifting Content Podcasts. My guests today are Nicole and Ian. Both of you, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you so much for having us on the show.
My pleasure. I actually met Ian a year ago at a screening of his film Amplify Her, which we're going to speak about today. And then we went on to speak at an event. How have I forgotten the name of that event already? That's
FemQ.
awful. FemQ, the FemQ Summit. There you go.
Yeah.
I've spoken about it so much as well in podcast episodes. So it's lovely to have you here and to speak to Nicole, who also helped create this beautiful film.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into that, I like to ask guests to just share a bit about who you are, what you do, and then for both of you to say how you guys started working together would be great. So maybe let's start with Nicole. Ladies first.
Yeah, great.
Okay, great. So I am basically I define myself as a cross-platform story world builder, which basically means that I like to tell stories across platforms. So I don't like to necessarily limit what I do to a film in this, but I actually like to take a story and make it sort of transcend boundaries so that people can experience it in multiple different ways.
Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny when you broke it down, it sounds so simple. I was like, actually, that's genius. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been a filmmaker for just over a decade now. And I think that really started with, I wanted to respond to these times of, deep kind of cultural change. And for me, going to places like, Burning Man and being involved with the Occupy movement, that there was these, I could start feeling these threads of emergent culture that were happening that had unifying principles and values, but weren't necessarily directly connected. And the power of story, the power of film became the primary way in which I felt that these could be amplified and really pollinating global culture at large. And so I feel for me, that's really been my interest, is actually, as I find these new stories, that, bringing them through the medium of film and creating, for example, with Nicole, this whole vast story world that actually opens up, creative possibility of a future that works for all life.
And so it's fair to say that for you, like a big interest in the work that you do is stuff that unifies, that brings people together, that's all about connection and humanity and that type of stuff. Oh, maybe not just humans, but oneness.
Yeah. There's a term that I've come across which I really like. It's this community in Portugal called Tamera, of which I could speak a lot about. But they have this principle called coherence, which I really like it in this idea that so many movements around the world, so many people, creatives, are coming together, but they all have a different piece of the tapestry. And so coherence is a way of just being able to say, oh, like you're doing that piece. Awesome. I don't have to reinvent that one. I don't have to handle it. You've got it. I can just do this piece. And we begin to see each other as connected, and all, our gifts are needed, but all in different ways.
I love that. Tell me the name of that group.
Well, coherence is the principle, and Tamera, which is a eco village in Portugal, is where I first learned that.
Very cool. I might be looking into that.
Yeah.
And so how did you two come together to work on this film, Amplify Her?
Mm-hmm. You want to take Nicole?
I don't know. I mean, you're the one. Well, I guess I'll start with Ian and I met at a conference called Media That Matters up on Cortes Island, this beautiful, beautiful island, kind of between mainland British Columbia and Vancouver Island. And basically the conference is really all about creating impactful media in the world. And ironically, what's kind of interesting about that conference is that a lot of the people that ended up working on this film are people that all of the people, our cinematographer, one of our cinematographers, and one of the writers on the film, we all actually met in different years at that conference. So that's where Ian and I first met. But we first started working on a project directed by Vel Kroeber called Occupy Love. And Ian was one of the producers and brought me on to help build out the story world for that film. And I'm sure Ian can jump in and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so Occupy Love was really, again, this idea of reflecting back the movement of the time, which, was really building upon previous movements that connected a bit of like a global uprising, from Egypt, Spain, and then finally to Wall Street and beyond. And so That film was again about amplifying these elements and in a way having the movement be able to see itself in a new way and really within a global context. And so it was also around that time I had already been going to the Burning Man Festival for a number of years. And
I'll be going this year. Are you going this year?
Amazing. Yeah.
Excellent.
And we can give you some tips later if you like.
Yeah.
And from that experience, I witnessed a female artist named Applecat, who just in whatever she was doing in her, performance was deeply stirring. And I really had this sense that, there was this rise of the feminine that I could feel, and many could feel, that was coming. And yet it's a little too esoteric to try to just speak about it directly. And so for me, I was almost like witnessing the expression of it though. Yeah. And there was something in the way she performed, which really stirred this sense of the something about the feminine and its own unique expression. And so coming back, I had this sense, I was like, is there something here? Is there something to be told with this story? So I came to Nicole and I said, hey, this is now Occupy Love is mostly complete. And I said, I have this idea around, female DJs, producers, what do you think? Do you want to jump on board? And she was like, no, I don't.
Yeah, why not? What's wrong with that?
Nicole.
Well, at the time, he didn't tell me what the expression was that he wanted to find initially. He just basically said, I wanted to do a film about female DJs. And for me, I think I've been a woman or a girl that has grown up largely in groups of men. I own a tech company. I've always kind of been like the sole woman amongst a group of men. And I can admittedly say that for me, I felt like I wanted to say in response to that, well, I've done it, so can you. And I didn't want to focus on a gender-related film, to be quite honest. But here's where it gets interesting. So after I kind of, and I sheepishly did it because, there's a little bit of sense of like, I don't know, some, I guess just kind of starting to put up a mirror on yourself saying like, why are you saying no to this project? Right. Why don't you want to do a gender related film? You're a woman. So, and Ian then told me that his question that he wanted to ask in the film wasn't, why aren't there more women in this particular industry, which I find is incredibly polarizing and very discouraging for women. But instead he wanted to ask what was unique about feminine expression and how will it change our world or change our culture. And it stopped me in my tracks because for me, one of the questions I always try to ask myself when I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm going to work on a project is, what kind of world do you want to live in? And if the project fits into a deeper level of understanding for me in that question, then I need to challenge myself to be open to it. And so I sat back and I went, I don't even know what feminine expression means in my life right now. So here's an opportunity to reconnect with myself. And it was an incredible journey. It's so much so that there's a TEDx talk about it, and my own opening up of recognizing that I had all of these feminine things about myself that I had been masking for so long. Yeah,
I'm going to be sure to check out Nicole's TEDx. I haven't seen that yet. But what I really loved about the film, because it got me thinking about this whole idea about feminine expression too. And what I really loved is just this kind of question about the energy that female DJs bring to music versus male DJs. And a guy DJ had actually said in a thing, like, when a female DJ is performing, she's like making love to the audience. It's like an exchange, it's a dance, there's like flow, they're like feeling, it's just feeling. And he said when a guy's doing it, it's like it's just like them and it's ego, and it's just like, listen to my music, and it's like kind of forceful and in your face. And some people love that, but not everyone does. And it makes me listen to music in a different way. And I know that I definitely prefer the lovemaking type of music. And it's funny because I've been going to festivals and events and a lot of stuff lately. And I'm just like, I just can't stand this, pump, pump, pump music at me anymore. So it was just a really fantastic, it's a beautiful, fantastic film. So tell me, Ian, about like how how this idea, like the growth of the idea and getting it made and how that all came about.
Yeah, so not needing to go into sort of back end financial structures of documentary filmmaking, but really from a mythic level, it's that Nicole and I came together. We brought it to various people to try to get the film funded, and luckily we did. And we just began this journey of really starting with Applecat, the artist in the film, and then kind of wove through to connect and see where the mycelial network, drew us. And for us, it was this mix of both intuition and impulse, to see what stories were out there and who consciously or unconsciously was actually also, participating in this emergence. And that led us to, people like Blondtron, who in the film, ended up being much larger character than we had initially anticipated.
Yeah, she's a Canadian DJ, right?
Yeah, DJ
And
producer. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, Canadian DJ producer who like was just very against you and just thought this was going to be a really kind of stupid documentary, kind of similar to Nicole, thinking, "What is this about? Why do women and whatever?" And then when you sort of gave her the question of, how do you feel women about feminine?
Feminine energy in this time. Yeah, what is it actually bringing?
It really floored her, huh?
Completely. Yeah, exactly. And then, she really, in a way, and many of the women too, this is the journey of making the film, was, again, both bringing their stories to light, but also how they saw themselves, actually. And in this sense, many of them felt seen, actually, for the first time. Actually, Blondtron, and in particular too, had said, wow, like I felt so alone in this crusade, in a way, of not being understood or following her own creative impulses. And then we as filmmakers were able to actually reflect back at her and say, hey, we see you, actually. And the process by which we then extended the story world, which Nicole brought in really strongly, was this idea that the women, they have usually interesting outfits and names, that alternate names. And we thought, well, they're kind of like superheroes in a way.
Yeah.
Right. And so we decided to extend their stories by bringing together other female creatives in a very unique process that maybe Nicole could speak to.
Yeah, so one of the things that I found quite fascinating when we were interviewing a lot of the characters was that one of the things that kept on reoccurring for many of them was this idea of just not feeling safe to express themselves. Feeling quite alone.
Right now, actually.
Yes. It's a huge problem. And it's a huge problem across industries for women. And so this was something that just kept on reoccurring in these conversations when we got quite deep with many of the artists. Another thing that was kind of interesting is that a lot of women had never actually had the opportunity to work together before, which was kind of crazy to hear, at this day and age, that so many women hadn't actually worked together in groups before. So when we decided to basically take the stories and build them, each character kind of into their own superhero, making them and turning them into graphic novel characters, part of that, to me, answering that question meant that we had to bring them together in flesh, because now oftentimes a lot of stuff we do is very digital, and this is a very international group. So we organized a retreat basically on a remote island in the middle of again close to Vancouver. We flew in women, so 6 different music producers, 7 illustrators for the comic book industry, and then also 6 different animators. And so these were all women that got to come together on a remote island. And I worked really hard in creating an experience that from the moment they stepped onto the island to the point where we were completed, that every moment was basically that a journey was created and we were taking them on a journey. From the beginning, we started off in ritual, getting a lot of the women to also collaborate with us to talk about different tropes that we see in media and how to flip them, all the way through to creating a Samoan circle and having some really deep conversations. So much so that one of the most fascinating moments of that was one of the cinematographers that was female was shooting the Samoan circle, and she felt so called to talk that she put her camera down and then jumped in the center of the circle and just started connecting, and that's just an example of how needed the ability of being able to hold each other in deep community is. And then towards the end of the retreat, we started to build their stories basically on this idea of, yes, superheroes, but what we really are fascinated about is how women can identify with their greatest wounds and see them blossom into some of their what makes them unique and ultimately a place for their superpowers. And at the end of the retreat, we actually brought a world famous body painter to the island who literally transformed the women into these characters that their groups had imagined. So they actually got to embody this sort of superheroine character, which was so incredibly profound and transformational, and something I wasn't expecting, that I honestly hid the morning everyone was leaving because I didn't think I could deal with people being, I guess, like grateful for the experience. For some reason, I didn't think I could deal with that. So I actually didn't show up to receive it. So, I mean, that's some of my own growing that's happening throughout the process, right?
Yeah. Wow. So I love that. So that's kind of part to do with your work about this. So putting things out across multiple different platforms.
Yeah.
So there's the film, and then in the film there's these animated things that obviously these graphic designers had created of these amazing women. They're personified superhero characters like that. So there's so much that people can get from it, and you have the comic book that's out, right, that people can get access to. And then did you turn it, because I know that there's the animations that were in the movie, the documentary, did you create like there's a series,
so there's an animated series as well that's based off the chapters in the graphic novel. And what's interesting about that is, it's an animated motion comic series, so it's not quite like a cartoon, because, and it's similar, as you've seen in the film, there isn't like a ton of motion, but it's more about making it feel like gritty, like a comic book. But then what's interesting is that it's actually voiced over by the real women. Even some of their friends and family came in and voiced over some of the chapters, which was really special. And then of course they scored, so they created the music and composed the music for each of their own chapters. So when you're watching it, it's like, if you watch Gem and the Holograms when you're younger, there's like a sense of this, I don't know, like women and music, but instead of watching some fictionalized characters, you're seeing real women's stories that are, I like to say, hyper fantasticized. So they're expressed in very different ways. Fantasy, or there's one that's kind of sci-fi. But they're based on real women, and they're voiced over by real women. And you get to hear the expression of 3 women. So the illustrator, animator, and the music artist each own their own talent, but bring it together in a unified piece.
Where can I see that?
We have some of them online right now on our YouTube channel, and the rest will be coming out within the next couple weeks on the website exclusively, so amplifyher.com. So there's a section for the motion comics, and you'll be able to watch each one of them.
So cool. And the movie you had a theatrical release recently, and the movie is now available on Amazon Prime. Where is that? The UK, the US, and Australia, did you say?
It's the US, Canada, and Australia right now. Yeah. US,
Canada, Australia for Amplify Her. And it's fantastic. And so I've always been doing this with just sharing stuff on as many platforms as possible. So we do this, it goes on YouTube, it goes on Facebook, we do a clip, it goes on Instagram, it goes on Twitter, it goes on LinkedIn, we do the podcast, like as much as however I can get it out there, I get it out there. And so I just love that that's what you do, Nicole. And just this idea of having the movie for those that love documentaries, these animations for those that are into that kind of, anime and things like that. And then the comic, which thank you for offering to give away 4 copies of the comic for people that love to consume and get their messages through that sense. So, so we'll have all the links and the giveaway information about the comic book in the signups.
So that comic, in a way, is also permission for other women, and in particular, actually younger women who connect with that medium, to again be able to invite them in to see themselves from this mythological framework, and in that sense to feel less alone and more able to tap into their unique gifts. So in that sense, it is very multidimensional. This project, it's sort of beyond entertainment in a way, but it's actually both a kind of a response to the question, like what does the unique expression of feminine look like, as well as it is like an incarnation of that community, that integration, not just for women, but also for men to be able to see like, wow, like this shift that we're seeing largely in the global culture isn't to be feared in that sense, that it's actually, in a way, like this necessary reorientation that the culture needs at large, where you could say this conversation around toxic masculinity comes up a lot, but really I see it as it's like masculinity that's untethered to proper orientation, right? Because if the masculine is just like, we just got to keep doing, we just got to keep doing, we just got to keep doing, which is what the culture tells them, just keep doing. Then we lose this sense of like, what are we doing it for though? And this is the big message that, Blondtran, I think, brings in the film, where she says, this is the response to that. The orientation comes from the feminine.
Very, very cool indeed. And so I wanted to kind of touch back to the question that you asked when you started this documentary, and just to get from you some of the common themes that showed up. And so that was obviously one of them, the fact that in order for it to work, there needs to, so you said about the orientation, the feminine being the orientation. That was one of the things that came up for you. What were some of the other things that had came up about feminine expression, like reasons for maybe why it's being suppressed, or like what were some of the other things that came up a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I could wager one was strong for me is that so much of the, let's say, the masculine structures of the culture at large are based on a kind of competition, right? And that's not to say that competition is wrong. There is such a thing as healthy competition. But in a culture where it's sort of, the strive to be better than is really a kind of barrier against, the fear of actually, losing out or being cast aside or all that stuff. So the thing that emerged from the feminine understanding was cooperation, right, is actually the core value. And that's not to say, again, this idea that, all women love to cooperate or something, but it's like the wisdom and the intelligence of the feminine is actually that we are all stronger when we cooperate. And it's not about power over, it's about power with, for example, right? That's one, emergent theme that I feel is strongly, needed, in the culture at large. Another one is this idea though of, deep embodiment that, I can speak as a man that just like, the head is generally seen as prime, in the masculine way. And that, the rational intellectual is, that's the realm that is most seen as valuable. And yet I've been able to, as I even myself connect more into the body, wisdom of the body, it has a whole other cosmology of understanding that comes through. And, for women, they're, through whatever reason, biology and the processes of, menstruation and the connection to, the cycles of the earth and all these ways that they have perhaps an ability to more innately tap into that. And in a culture that doesn't really value it, that's part of the suppression. Is like, you don't really know what you're talking about. But, that wisdom, I mean, I see you nodding your head. I see like really necessary, again, the somatic embodied orientation is so crucial in this time.
The episode that came out, that's coming out the week before we released this one with you, I interviewed a guy called Brian Reeves, and a lot of his work, we had this very conversation about how he was just so in his head. He was in the military, and that made him even more disconnected. And when he came out, just realizing, there's just so many men and women. I think women can connect naturally better, but it's because of how society has us be. But there's this massive disconnect, and I'm doing a lot of practices at the minute with like yoga and breath work and like visualization and meditation, just bringing myself into my body. And currently working on a book, and one of the topics that came up, one of the speakers' topics was about make your decisions from your heart, not your head. And I just do a visualization exercise of just having a light in my head and bringing it down to my heart. And just by doing that exercise, the noise shuts off, and it makes me realize just how very often we're just not connected to our heart and our head. So I'm glad that was a theme that was coming out through the film and in the conversations. How has the film been received?
Nicole, you want to take it?
Well, it's definitely interesting. I would say that the film has to me, I feel like it's going to end up as a cult film. So people that, what I mean by that is it's maybe not necessarily distributed as widely through mainstream culture, but it's been shared and people share it widely because they care about the content. So our film has played at several festivals. Interestingly enough, here in Canada, we actually didn't get accepted to any major Canadian film festivals, which was difficult for us, I think, but widely accepted in Australia, which was incredible. And then we actually released the film in a very interesting way, whereby, and I mean, part of this is also my own nerdiness and loving to develop experiences. So I didn't want to necessarily just have it play in a movie theater. To me, the film had to be more than that. And so we created an entire experience whereby you would get a graphic novel when you walked into the movie theater. There would be different women playing throughout the evening, so DJing, and in some cases we'd bring in live instrumentation. So you would get to walk into the movie theater and hear things.
I have to say thank you for that, by the way, because I came to the LA screening and it was Closey, and it was Blondron, I think. Was she DJing too with that? Yeah. I love Closey so much now. She's a French producer DJ. I am literally obsessed with her because I'd seen her at Lightning in a Bottle before you guys' event, and then I met her and I was like, oh my God, I love her. Yeah. And I've just seen her at Burning Man and Lightning in a Bottle and Coachella this year. And maybe she'll be at Burning Man this year, who knows? But absolutely obsessed. But it makes for such a fun experience. You're right, like we got the novels, there was the screening, and then just to have the music and the show after that, I was like, and then what that did was by having the DJ sets is it made me really understand what you were saying. Like I could really sense and like feel these feminine qualities through the music from the performance afterwards. It's very clever.
Absolutely. And so that's how we decided to launch the film. So we did about, I think, 10 of those. We called them purple carpet screenings. And the idea for that was, we're not necessarily rolling out a red carpet, we're rolling out a purple carpet, which was really fun. And each one kind of, depending on the community we're in, shifted slightly, from different live events. We did workshops. The Berlin one was absolutely phenomenal. We got flown over to Singapore to do a screening sponsored by the United Nations, the country of Singapore and Canada, which was, again, just super fascinating. So that was incredible. And then what we found was that there were a lot of people that just really appreciated the film and wanted to tour it for us. So there was just recently someone who had seen it in Berlin, who had just seen my TED Talk, I think, a couple days before. She was Israeli, and went back to Israel, and then recently put on her own festival, 3-day festival, all themed around Amplify Her, with screenings and music and community. And so we encourage a lot of that, because, I mean, really this film is a collaboration with our audience and with women. And we're currently also working on a couple other really interesting collaborations in order to bring the world out. So I guess it's a long-winded way to say it's been a very interesting release. We've done it non-traditionally. Putting it on Amazon is probably the most traditional thing we've done thus far. We're hoping to get wider exposure for it, because we do believe it's an incredibly important film, and it doesn't matter what industry you work in, whether you're male or female. The film is something that we hope many people get a chance to experience.
And is that something that you're still doing? I remember at the LA release, you were saying if anyone knows anyone that would want to screen it or kind of play it, you're still looking for people, anyone that kind of wants to work with you in that capacity, and then just to reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a place on our website if people want to host a community screening. We give you all the tools you need in order to do that, and all of the support that you need. And actually, just mentioning that, one thing that's quite interesting is we've had over 70, I think was the last count, women that have played at Amplify Her screenings around the world from every country, which has been really cool.
You cut out just a second. Did you say 70? 70, you said?
Over 70 women that have actually played and been a part of the actual experience at an Amplify Her screening around the world. And that is super meaningful, because that's what this is all about.
Yes, I love it. Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. It's really lovely speaking to you. I absolutely love the film. I still think about it a lot. Like, it introduced me to one of my favorite DJs on earth. And so, I highly recommend people go out and see this. You can enter to win. They're giving away one of 4 copies of the graphic novel, and you can catch the movie on Amazon Prime or host your own screening, which is brilliant. So amplifyher.com, is it?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. I'll have all the links in the show notes. So thank you both, Nicole and Ian. Lovely speaking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.